Thank you again for joining me on the Sutherland Report. It's the 30th of December 2023, so we are getting so close to 2024. Now, I have a dear friend of mine on right now. I'm just going to introduce him, which is Dr. J.P. Sloane, Ph.D., and he is an expert in a variety of different things and also had a fascinating life so far because there's still plenty to come. And we're going to discuss Islam because he has written a book about that and also a book about replacement theology, amongst other things. So here we go. JP, fantastic to see you, my friend. How are you?
I am blessed. How are you?
I'm extremely well, despite all the things that we see what's going on. As someone says, like someone like Jan Markel says, everything is falling into place.
That's right. That's right. And we were warned, so we're to look up.
Yeah. Amen. No, I thank you for saying that. JP, on the 7th of October, and I'm asking everyone this because it's really, really important we start from that point. On the 7th of October in Israel, which is a subject that is extremely close to my heart and extremely close to your heart, there was the biggest, a pogrom since the Holocaust during the Second World War, which happened on the 7th of October, where 1,300 Israelis were slaughtered, murdered, and some acts that went on that we won't discuss that are just beyond indescribable and despicable. And then you and I have seen the fact that the Hamas terrorists that went over the fence, all of this was broadcast, GoPro cameras, etc., etc. Then there has been an explosion on the streets of young people protesting. After a couple of days, then it was the usual thing of saying to Israel, please be restrained in your response. What say you from your from your side of the pond and what you were observing? Were you shocked by what has happened on the streets, the expressions, the comments, the singing? What are your thoughts?
Well, of course, I did part of my undergrad education at a campus in Israel. Jews are very dear to me. I'm not surprised because I read the Bible. And there's a lot of bad stuff in the Bible. I say bad because it's warfare and hurtful things toward the Jews. But I'm not surprised. I really believe are in the end days. Let me kind of regress just a little bit and lay kind of a groundwork here. This would pertain a lot to my book, The Evil History of Replacement Theology. What happened and how replacement theology came about. Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Israel, took them into captive, never came back as a nation because Jeroboam and his brother Rehoboam, sons of Solomon, divided the kingdom. It was one kingdom. They divided it. You had the northern kingdom, Israel, and the southern kingdom, which was Judea. That's where the name Jew comes from. Judah. Now, by the time Jesus was walking the earth, it had been about 500-600 years since Israel had even existed as a nation. In the first century, the second century, let's go to the first century. In the first century, the question was, can a Gentile become a Jew? And we see that with Paul because he was the prophet to the Gentiles. In the second century, it became, can a Jew become a Christian? And from then on, it's a mess. Now, the first couple of centuries after the Lord went to be with the Father, we see them developing the theory of allegory. Allegory means you can make the Bible say anything you want it to make. There is allegory in the Bible. In the New Testament, referred to it as parables. But after every parable, Jesus explains what it means. In the Old Testament, when there's an allegory, Samuel came to David and accused him of some things and told a story. And David said the results of that story, that the man that he was speaking about should be killed. And the man, then Samuel says, that's you, David. Okay. So the point of that is just to say that allegory, if it's found in the Bible, is always explained. It's not up to us. I believe it was Second Peter 3. It says that the Bible is not up to prophecy. When God gave it, he had one thing in mind, not a bunch of things, but one thing. And so we have a problem now. Israel hadn't been in the land for going on almost 1,000 years, and all the end time prophecy is about Israel. Now, no country has ever gone past the third generation after it's been conquered. If they didn't, by the third generation, go back in and conquer it, it never came back as a country. So they're thinking, well, Israel, this has been hundreds, almost 1,000 years. It can't be, it'll never come back as a country. So how do we explain this? Or our religion's wrong? We've got to do something or we're going to lose people. Oh, let's say that we replaced Israel. Now, if these people and high people in the church would have read the Bible, Paul addresses that in Romans 11. He says, yes. God through with Israel? God forbid. And he goes on to talk about his lineage and everything else and how God's got a time where Israel's going to be removed. But in the end, we're all going to come to know the same God and love him and embrace him. But ignoring that, they had to come up with something and say, well, let's say the church has replaced Israel, and wherever we read about Jerusalem in the last days, that means heaven. And so since we replaced Israel, we start hating the Jews. Why? Because they killed Jesus. Now, about the time of the crucifixion, Jesus had about, well, we know thousands of followers. When we read about the times when he spoke on the mountain and all the people were there, they said there were about 5,000 people and he fed them. And but in Judaism, when they said 5,000 people, they were referring to men. There were women there too. They weren't counted. There were children there too. They weren't counted. So the number could have very easily been 10,000. And this happens a couple of times recorded in the New Testament. But we know that when he rose from the dead, 500 people were seen walking about that were his followers. Not to mention I think at that time there were about 70 disciples, because the original 12, but he sent 70 out. And so we do a little studying and research. You'll see that the Jews didn't kill Jesus except this way. We had a president named Abraham Lincoln. He was killed. And I believe it was an American who killed him. And we had Kennedy was killed by an American, and a couple of other presidents. So we could truthfully say that Americans killed their presidents. And that's true, but it's not fleshed out. And so people are very good at using minutia to make it appear as something that's not. A good example, excuse me, today with Islam, I have 4 different Qurans. But the newer ones are coming out for Western consumption, because after 9/11, people got really interested in Islam. When you read it, you'll see it's not a religion of peace. It's a religion of war. As a matter of fact, the dying words of Muhammad was, Allah hates the Jews and Christians. The dying words of Jesus was, God forgive them. So there's the difference between Christianity and Judaism, or Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Islam is the only religion I know of that has an open-ended warfare on a group. But getting back to what we were talking about, so you have to get rid of the allegory and everything. But because of this, people have hated the Jews, claiming they killed Jesus. And of course, when you go into the Middle Ages, you didn't have people who could read and write. The church had the priests who could read and write. They knew their local language. They knew Latin. They were very intelligent. So I'm not putting them down. But it was up to the priest to explain to the congregation what they needed to know. So you had a lot of superstition. And you've seen that. I'm in the United States, so we don't have that fine European background that you have. You're in Christendom. I'm not. I'm in the New World, and it's not even mentioned in the Bible. So here we have all these people making up this stuff against the Jews. Well, I had one teacher in a college I was going to in Colorado. He said, "Well," he says, "we know that Islam has been hard, and they came in almost immediately and got Italy and Spain and all this stuff. But how about the Crusades?" Oh, the Crusades. Yes, just as bad. Christians are just as bad. Well, I did a little research on that. It's fascinating. Pope Leo IV, in around 850 AD, they were being invaded, of course, by Islam. The Muslims were coming over and robbing them and, everything. And so the French were coming together to fight them. But he had a complaint. He said, the soldiers that were standing up against the Muslims said, these people are invincible. They're not afraid to die. They almost welcome it. What are we going to do? We can't fight against a person like that. So Pope Leo started studying Islam. And in Islam, if you die, that is the only guarantee. If you die in a jihad, the only guarantee that you go to heaven. Even Muhammad said, I don't know if I'm going to be allowed to go to heaven. And I wish I had my memory of my youth, because I'd be able to give you addresses for that. But you can find it in my books. I document everything in my books so that people know when it's my opinion, I make it clear. And when I'm actually quoting, I make that clear too, because that's important. Too many people say, well, the Bible says God helps those who help themselves. But no, that was Poor Richard's Almanac. That was Benjamin Franklin. So you really have to document things you claim. But be that as it may, he took a page from Islam. And he says, if you die under the sign of the cross, angels will come and immediately take you to heaven. So he was fighting fire with fire. Now, around 1096, 98, right there, we have Pope Urban II, and he started the first Crusades. So here's the Crusades. He took a page from Pope Leo IV and said, if you die under the sign of the cross, you'll be immediately taken to heaven. Now, what does the Bible say about that? The Bible does not encourage warfare. It does say you have to defend yourself. But we're to love our enemies. That doesn't mean we're to allow them to walk all over us. And by the way, where it says if someone slaps you in the face, turn your cheek. Jesus meant, you remember in school, boys would walk up to you and do this, just a little tap, just to annoy you, to get you to stir up, maybe strike back. That's what he was talking about. If somebody hits you in the face, he didn't mean, he meant just a, but I'm getting off track. So he took the first crusade and they went through Europe.
Right.
And before they went to the Holy Land, they wiped out at least a third of the Jews. Why? So there was a Holocaust there. And in my book, I go through meticulously from the first century to pretty close to present date.
Is this your book on replacement theology?
This one is on the evil history of replacement theology, right?
Yeah. So it's in It's in this book. I'll just show the viewers
Right.
that, because it's in this book. But go on. Sorry, I apologize.
And so because of that, we have the Jews continually being killed. And I document so much in that book. Some of it's sad. My wife edits for me. And both she and I, when we were going through the editing, and actually got tears in our eyes. It's just horrible what's happened to the Jews. Now, I'm not trying to isolate a group, but I was shocked a few years ago to watch LGBT marching right in the holy city of Jerusalem with their flags and not being stopped. The Bible, and we're talking about the God of the Bible, for those of you who are agnostic, atheist, or believe in something else. The Bible says that homosexuality is an abomination. That's a very strong word. And God destroyed a nation over that, actually two, Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham pleaded with God, if there's 50 good people, will you spare it? Okay, I'll spare it. Then he went down to 40. Then he pushed the envelope a little bit. Finally got down to 10 people. If there's 10 people that are good, will you spare it? Sodom and Gomorrah. And the angels of God who represented God said, we will. Well, when they went in, of course, you see, just a sidetrack here, we hear about the angel moms. First of all, when you die, you don't become an angel. That's unbiblical. And I mean, it's a sweet, sweet picture, but you don't become an angel. And angels are not feminine. I've got 2 trees in my home right now with beautiful female angels on the top of them. But there's no male angels. They're masculine. And I say masculine because there's no sex with angels. Jesus even said when they were taunting him, you know, when when you die and you go into to heaven, is there going to be any sex? And he said, no, you'll be like the angels in heaven. That's in Matthew. But the point is, we have a tendency to hate the Jews. Now, when I saw that with the homosexuals, I thought, I could see maybe Tel Aviv or around the area kind of being, but in the holy city of Jerusalem. And then we see what's happened to them. And the same thing's happening to America. We had a great president in Trump, whether you like him or not. The fact is, gas was, well, for the first time, we were exporting gas, not importing it. Gas was low. Prices were good. My black friends were working. Hispanics were working. It just was wonderful. And he was attacked from the time he came down the elevator. You see, if you tell a lie long enough and strong enough, it becomes truth. Hitler. And that's another thing, a real quick side. They call him Hitler, a Nazi. Well, Nazi, N-A-T-Z-I, was for the German spelling of Nationalist Socialist, which is the Democrat Party. And the Nazi, the T has a Z sound, so it'd be not Z. And so when we spelled it in English, hearing them refer to the shortened version, we spelled it with a Z, Nazi. Anyway, so we have these things occurring where God has to discipline us. And he does. But he said he'd never take Israel, they'd never be gone again. And here's another thing. In Ezekiel 37, he says, you'll never be divided again. So this divisional thing they're doing, trying to pacify these so-called Palestinians, they're really Arabs. And when I see free Palestine, I say, I agree. Send the Arabs back to Arabia. Free Palestine. What is Palestine? Most people don't really know. We know of the Philistines. By the time Jesus was on the earth, Philistia had been gone 700
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
But they kept rebelling. Jews are very rebellious people, and that's because of their passion for God, the ones that really love God. And so here comes this Emperor Hadrian. Now, Hadrian, are you familiar with Emperor Hadrian? You probably are, but a lot of the people listening might not. Emperor Hadrian was quite a bottom line guy. Unlike, Barack Obama, he drew a line in the sand. We crossed it, so he moved back a little bit and drew another line. When Hadrian drew a line, that was it, brother. So you're in England, and we know about Scotland, and the warriors were horrific. And hey, the British weren't sissies either.
No.
But these guys were rough. So Emperor Hadrian said, we'll build a wall across Scotland. It was from one major, I believe, river to another major river. So it was basically the cutting off the whole thing, just a big, kind of like the wall of China, you might say. Not quite as impressive, but
the wall of China was also built to keep marauding people out.
Right. So walls are a good thing. Now, Hadrian, having built that wall there, he comes to Israel, giving Rome a lot of trouble. There was a revolt going on. And he says, I've had it. He says, he tears down the Capitol, makes it a Capitolona or something. I'm a little off on that. But Capital was in it. It's a Latin version of it. But anyway, he renamed Jerusalem. And they put up a temple worshiping Saturn. And he said, we're going to rename it Syrio-Palestinia, in remembrance of the ancient enemy of the Jews, or the Hebrews. We really should say Hebrews because Jews are one tribe. But most of them were sent, the Jews from Judea were sent into Europe, along with the Koinian and the Levites, the priestly caste, because they were in Jerusalem.
And sorry to interrupt, and the emperor did that out of spite, didn't he?
Yes, out of spite. He hated him. So he says, I'll show you, I'm going to name you after your old enemy. Well, they weren't Arabs. I've read some studies on it. They think they were a seafaring nation, maybe from Greece, the Phoenicians.
Yeah. And
they settled along the coast. But I had one teacher said, well, if it's named Palestine, it's Palestine all the way from the sea far back. Well, I'm speaking in near Indianapolis, which is in the center of the United States. But if I were in a boat off of Los Angeles, which is my home, I guess I'm in Los Angeles because everything beyond the sea behind Los Angeles is considered Los Angeles. I mean, that's how stupid it is. Or I guess we could have a fight over it and say I'm in New York. But the truth is, Philistia was just maybe 12 miles inland. I don't think it got any further than that. But now we had some people, and there's always been a Jewish presence there. As a matter of fact, before 1948, the Palestinian orchestra was the Jewish orchestra, which they later changed to the Israeli orchestra, and the Palestinian Times used to be is now the Jerusalem Post. And so these names, just to modernize it. But of course, Yasser Arafat, who was an Egyptian, talked to the Viet Cong and said, maybe you can help me here. We're trying to have a reason why we should kick the Jews out and we stay. And they explained to him, well, you got to create a background and a nation. Okay, let's say there was a nation called Palestine. Who was its most famous king? What's the most famous product that Palestine produced? I mean, Swiss have cheese, France has wine, England has the Beatles.
Well, the answer is no. The answer, we can't, because it didn't exist.
And what was their currency? What kind of money? What money did they use? What was a famous war they fought? There was none. So, but they created this, and people are so, again, like I mentioned before, out of the Nazi regime, tell a lie over and over and over, and long enough it becomes truth. Think about Trump. He's been attacked so much, tried so much, the Congress, the courts, and never been proved guilty. But everybody thinks he's a criminal because, well, it's like Rush Limbaugh once said, it isn't the fact that you are guilty of something, it's that the accusation is so strong. And so when you hear a strong accusation against somebody, well, where there's smoke, there must be fire. Not necessarily true. So, but we're living in the times now. Who's the greatest? Well, who's the father of lies? I believe it's John 8:44, Satan. He is the murderer and the father of lies. In the last days in Romans, is it 21? I'm not sure, but it's in Romans. It says that they would not repent of their murders and sorcery. The Greek word for sorcery is pharmakeia, pharmacy, drugs.
Yeah.
Do we see a lot of murder and drugs going on in the world now? Our borders here in America? I believe that the cartel is a shadow military of China. And so we've got a lot of things happening in the world now. And that's why I say we're coming to a conclusion. In Zechariah 12:3, it says the whole world will come against Jerusalem.
Yes.
Now, as I shared with you, I walked around the old city of Jerusalem. It took me about 45 minutes. Now, of course, Jerusalem today is a bigger city. It's sprawling. When I was a kid, LA had a few tall buildings. Now it looks like New York. But the point is, when the prophecy was given, it was small. And you're thinking, there's no oil wells. There's no gold mines. There's no silver mines. There's nothing that's on the top of a mountain. It's not even really a main thoroughfare. People would usually move along the coast where the Philistines used to be. And it's just not a trade route per se. I mean, yeah, you'd have some caravans going through, especially after it got established, because they would send caravans out and caravans would come in to bring them goods and services. But there was nothing there. Why would the whole world come against Jerusalem? London? Well, that makes sense. Los Angeles, Paris, Tokyo, these big cities, Babylon? Yeah. Jerusalem? And then we see that Moshe Dayan, he was the general with the patch over his eye when they had the war. They conquered it, but he gave it back to the Muslims. He said, "Oh, you can keep it." I think he was probably agnostic.
You're talking about the 67, the 6-Day War in 67.
6-Day War. And the Muslims said, "Gee, we thought you were going to kick us out and put the temple up." They were shocked. But he didn't. And I think God knew that. And that's why I think the whole world's going to come against Jerusalem. They say that Jerusalem is the third holiest city in Islam. That when Muhammad had his dream, he went to heaven from the furthest mosque. In it says from the closest mosque to the furthest mosque. And it was the furthest mosque he went to heaven.
Is Jerusalem, sorry, JP, sorry, is Jerusalem actually mentioned in the Quran?
Jerusalem is mentioned in the Quran exactly 0.
Exactly.
It's never mentioned. And the Byzantines had the Dome of the Rock. I think that's in chapter 3 of Islam Exposed. I have a 3-volume set too on Islam, over 1,200 pages. And I show pictures of 5 different areas where that same building shape is of the Dome of the Rock. It's an octagon. Byzantines built that. Muhammad would hardly go to heaven from a Christian altar, but they twist and revise. And like I was starting to say earlier, the new Qurans are designed for Western consumption. They change it around a little bit. Let me see. I got something out of here.
Do they take the violence? Do they take all the violence out then? Is it as simple as that?
No, they. Well, let me share. Let's see if I can give you an example of how they redo it. They don't take the violence out, but they tweak it. This is off the internet. This is a hadith.
Yeah.
And it's about the last days. And this is why there cannot be peace in Israel. It's Shahi, which means truly spoken. It's been investigated, and that's the stamp of approval. Shahi al-Bukhari 2476. It's also found in book 46 of Hadith 37. I won't go through all the numbers because nobody's going to write it down or remember it. You can rewind it if you want. But it says the coming of Jesus and the abolishment of the jizya tax. Now, jizya tax, they would conquer people and they'd let you live, but you had to pay a tax because you weren't a Muslim. And they're required to pay in the 5 pillars of Islam. One of the pillars is you have to give to charity. That's a good thing. But here's what it says. The hour of judgment will not come until Jesus descends as a just ruler. So far, so good. And abolishes the jizya tax. Kills the pigs and breaks the crosses. He breaks the crosses because Christianity is wrong. Kills the pigs. They say that it's because the pigs were unkosher. Well, kosher is Jewish, but they kind of copy because Allah is supposed to be the same God that gave the Bible. So they call halal is the same as kosher, and pigs are not kosher or halal. So Jesus, they're saying, oh, he's coming to kill all the pigs because they're an unclean animal. I looked up in unclean animals in Islam, meat of pigs, boars, which is a pig, swine, that's a pig, strictly prohibited in Islam, but so are meats from the carnivorous animals such as lions, tigers, cheetahs, dogs, they hate dogs, and cats, birds of prey such as eagles, falcons, ospreys, and it goes on and on. So there's a lot of, well, why doesn't he kill all of them then? No, the pigs are the Jews. Because they call the Jews sons of apes and pigs. 4 different places. They use pigs once, but the apes are in each one of them.
And there's 4 different places within the Quran that they describe the Jews in this way. And now, the reason why I'm emphasizing that is that JP, is that we're going to the sources. We're going to the book, right? I've
always said this. Most Christians don't know their Bible. We know kind of the stories. We know the Christmas story. We know the crucifixion story. We know the flood and Adam and Eve, and we kind of know the stories. And most Muslims are kind of the same way. They know the stories and everything, but when it comes down to really reading it and understanding, they prefer to just let their imam or their, whoever their religious leader is, tell them, like the Christians of the Middle Ages who were uneducated. The priest would tell them what they needed to know. And so this is what happens. But if, let's say you've got a nice, and I have Muslims in my family. My brother was married a Muslim woman and her family, very nice people. And when I studied in Israel, a lot of nice Muslim families. The difference is, let's say, Christians have their Bible on the table, but seldom pick it up. Muslims might have the Quran on the table, but seldom pick it up. But the one day some Muslim guy sits down, picks up the Quran and starts reading it, he takes seriously Muhammad's teaching. And he realizes that he's been wrong pretty much by being so nice to everybody. And I mean, in one of my books, I list all the jihad verses, and there's pages of them. And it's but here's the thing. Here's a comparison between Christianity and Islam. You know, Jesus said, love your neighbor. Love your enemy too. Didn't mean to say just surrender to them if they come in and walk all over you. No, that's wrong. You know, but love them, pray for them. Even though you're fighting them, you pray for them. Understand that they've been, I don't want to say brainwashed, because when you're raised, I guess we're all brainwashed to an extent. But here's the open-ended warfare compared to the Christians and Jews. In Christianity, it says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Matthew 24:14. We're spreading the gospel. We preach it. But I think it was Matthew 10:14, where he says, if they don't receive it, shake the dust from your clothes and move on. Didn't say kill them, force them. Just shake the dust and move on. Islam. The last hour will not come until the Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. Hadith Sahih Muslim 41:69-85. Basically, what that particular hadith says, and I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit because I don't have it in front of me right now, but it says that a Muslim will walk by a grave and wish that he was in it. For the last days won't come until war is declared on the Jews. Now, what's the last days? Doomsday is Middle English for Judgment Day. But after that, then it's supposed to be just everything's going to be wonderful. So we kind of want the last days to come so we can get rid of this old sinful world, although Muslims don't believe in sin, or at least original sin, and just a wonderful, beautiful existence with God and peace, and everything's going to follow. That's wonderful. So the end days are important, but it says a tree and a stone will call to you and say, oh, Muslim, there's a Jew behind me. Come and kill him. All except the boxthorn tree, which is the tree of the Jews. I'm using the English word for that tree. So basically, in a nutshell, it says the end days can't come until war is declared on the Jews, and even the trees and rocks are going to say, come, O Muslim, there's a Jew behind me, kill him.
JP, I just want to jump in and say that some of the placards that people have had on the streets of this country, and I can't comment in regard to around the world, maybe on your side of the pond, but they're referring to this kind of thing. They're referring to calling them animals. They are referring to hiding behind trees. And we, in our ignorance, do not understand any of this history, this historic, where this historic hate has, well, we understand it biblically, but stirring up this from the teachings of Muhammad.
Muhammad, when he first started out and had about 10 people in his family, said that you can't compel, you can't force people to accept a religion. I'm just sharing it with you. And they use that passage, they meaning Muslim apologist. Apologist doesn't mean I'm walking around saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Apologist means defending the faith. Words twist and become different things, like gay use. My wedding was gay, by the way. There was nobody unhappy at my wedding. It was a gay time, just like Christmas, where we wear our gay apparel. It was a wonderful time, lighthearted, frivolous, just wonderful. But now it means something else.
Absolutely. And words, as you were saying, we're saying before coming live on the interview, is that, you know, words have power. Words are powerful, and how that is then changed.
Yes. Let me tell you something that shocks a lot of my conservative friends. I'm a liberal. I'm a traditional liberal in the way it always meant to be. We don't have liberal colleges. We don't have liberal education. We don't have liberal parties. Liberal means I have a conviction
Hmm.
and you're challenging me.
Hmm.
I'll listen. What have I got to lose? And I might take away something that I agree with. You may even change my mind completely. And I'll say, hey, okay, by golly, I didn't realize that. I'm with you now on this. Or I might say, well, I've heard your argument. I respect it. You brought some good points up, but I'm not convinced, and I'm going to stay with my position. That's a liberal. Liberty University, Pat Robertson, invited Kennedy, who was a very liberal senator, to speak. When he came on, did they threaten to burn buildings down? Did they boo him? Did they shut him down? No, the student body was very polite. They applauded him. They listened to him, and they thanked him for coming.
In other words, you're reminding us in many ways of a very healthy debate. I'm going to allow you to come in, express your opinion. Then it's now going to be my turn to express an opinion. And right now, that is the discussion that we have started, which we're going to continue with over time, but with not too long breaks, I hope, is the fact that we are bringing history. You're bringing history. You're bringing facts to a discussion. As much as the discussion may be profoundly disturbing, it's a discussing that we have to have, because if we don't understand the history, we don't understand where it's come from, then we cannot move forward. We have no understanding of why things have suddenly erupted on the streets. And I'll just say this and finish, because suddenly we have seen young people on the streets going from the river to the sea. This whole this whole woke business, and then we've seen groups going, queers for Palestine, which is a total oxymoron, because if they were in Gaza, they wouldn't last 5 minutes, or in any Islam, in any country that would say it's Muslim and practicing Islam, they wouldn't be there. So this is what we're looking at, this whole thing of intersectionality, of suddenly, my pronoun, and this whole thing of saying, it's colonialism, who's the oppressor, and not understanding any of the history with any of this context at all.
Well, an example of how crazy everything is now. One of the arguments I've always heard from atheists and agnostics has been, well, I'm going to go with science. Now, Timothy writes about science. He says, you're fools in your science. And that's in the the New Testament King James Version. Others have changed it to knowledge. But that's all science means, is knowledge. It's not this big mysterious word that explains everything, because science is always in flux. The Bible isn't, but science is. I mean, we're taught the theory of evolution as fact, but they don't say the fact of evolution. They still say the theory of evolution, as though words don't matter. And we'll just kind of slide over that real quick. Racism has come out of Darwin. The front page of his book says that the Caucasian race is the most superior race of humans on the planet, and the Negro race is the most inferior. The only difference is melatonin in our skin. We're shades of brown. You can see the shirt I have on. That's white. And my skin looks a little pinkish beige, which is, in your skin, beige. And I used to spend hours at the beach in the summer getting darker than some of my black friends.
Yeah.
And it didn't change my intellect or anything else. But you see, that caused racism. We're a bunch of races. Now we're a bunch of sexes. We're ignoring science again. Wait a minute. There's a male and a female. My thing is this. You can do all the surgeries you want. You can put all the lipstick and makeup you want, or take off, or whatever you want to do. But until you can change your chromosomes, you're either XX or XY. And there's a few exceptions, minor exceptions that are in there, but then I'm talking in the generalities. I took evolutionary biology in college. I got an A in the subject. It's fascinating. And it just reinforced my faith in God, because it's what you have to swallow to believe evolution. It's like, I always would picture somebody at a pool table and they keep hitting the balls and balls keep hitting them. Those are molecules, let's say. And eventually, after millions of years, they hit just right. And all of a sudden, there was a life form. But in order for that life form to, did they all happen at once, or did all of a sudden that would be a miracle? And what are miracles? That's not science. So but of course, I think apes look very much like us. And I think God made apes to keep us humble.
Well, the other thing is, to even when they turn around and say that we have come out of apes, come out of monkeys, I think that's a huge insult to the apes and the monkeys that God has actually created. But that is another rabbit warren. We're in the last few minutes, JP, and we are going to continue this discussion because one of your incredible knowledge, because you have had so far, and it continues, an amazing life, and I know some of that, and which I'm really privileged to know. But this whole thing, the whole subject of Islam, is something that we have to get to grips with and understanding. In the last few minutes, and you raised this in an email to me, can you describe to me then, it maybe sounds like a simple question, even in many ways we've answered it, why has Hamas actually behaved in the way that it has behaved? Because it's not something that's discussed in the mainstream media because of its spiritual element.
Well, I remember when Iranians said they didn't care if we killed 1 million of their people, they were gonna attack us. And I remember when at the beginning, back in 2001, the Muslims were saying, we have thousands of suicide, people willing to give their lives. And I thought, that's hyperbole. Then as I studied Islam, I realized, no, like we said earlier, that's the only assurance of going to heaven is dying in a jihad. Jihad means struggle. And they'll try to tell you, well, like the redefining of gay, well, it really means homosexual. Well, jihad really means that you're just struggling against things within yourself. At work you're struggling, so that's jihad. That's disingenuous, is what it is. But you see, they have taqiyya. You can lie to make something. If it furthers Islam, kitman means you lie with a little truth. How would that be? So you come to me and say, JP, have you got $1 on you? I need $1. And I can truthfully say, no, Mark, I don't. I'm sorry. I've got $100 in my pocket, but I don't tell you that. I've got 100 of them, but I don't have $1. I'm not lying. And so these are the games. See, Islam plays games. Again, Allah approves of lying if it furthers Islam. Approves of dying if it furthers Islam. So let's say under the hospitals, they're firing rockets and rockets are returned and hits that hospital, and all these Palestinians, so-called, are killed. They're not soldiers. They're just killed. Hamas doesn't feel bad. They've done them a favor. This is a jihad. They died in a jihad. They are guaranteed heaven. We're guaranteed heaven by accepting Jesus as our Lord and Savior, by acknowledging that God came to earth and took on the flesh of man for 2 reasons. One, to be the second Adam, because the first Adam failed us. And the second, to say, and I've heard this with people of other religions, well, how can God understand me? He's not a human. He doesn't know. He's up there. He's God. He's got everything going for him. How can he understand? Jesus understands because he came put on flesh. He went through all the temptations and hells that we go through for us. And I I guess we could save it for another day. It's kind of interesting about the crucifixion, how it was rewritten but not rewritten. Well, let me just go ahead and tell you.
Save that for another day. There's
Okay.
a lot that we're going to have to save for another day
It's too
because
much.
we want to work through, particularly in our conversation with Islam, because there is, you know, your book, which I have a copy of, which I'm very grateful that you sent me quite a while ago. There is a huge amount of knowledge in here that is really important. JP, where can people find you if they want to find you? Where can they find you?
That's a good question.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I'm kind of in flux right now.
You're in flux, but do not worry. Do not worry. We will solve that. We will solve that in our next few conversations.
Through you.
Through me. You
Through
can
you,
find
because
me.
I've left Facebook.
Yeah.
Because at least all 5 people would read what I was putting out.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I was just censored again recently. They showed a picture of Goebbels with no speech or anything on it, and they said, "You've broken our rules." And I thought, well, a picture of Goebbels, how does that, how is this threatening? I had posted it several times, and what Goebbels said, and we'll leave this because this is what I'm hearing the politicians of today. Always accuse the other side of that which you are about.
Absolutely. I couldn't
He was the propagandist for the Nazis.
Yeah, absolutely. JP, I want to thank you for joining me. If we are going to do this again and again, and I'm very grateful for that. And if people want to get hold of JP, that you can do that through me. You can email me, marksutherland26@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter through the Sutherland Report, and find me. And if you've got any questions for JP, I will forward that. But he and I are going to continue with these conversations because JP has had a fascinating life that we also need to hear about as well. So thank you, my friend, for joining me. And we will do this extremely soon. And I'm gonna play us out. Okay. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. And I will join you again with another guest and with JP very soon. Thank you very much, my friend. Happy New Year. Thank you.